Visually, the Silva Aegis is probably one of the nicest looking ones. Even the sword is kind of energy based, as is the parts of the shield that aren't attached to each other, so it fits quite nicely away. The Prime version, however, I don't know. I still like it, but I think I prefer the visuals, especially for the melee weapon, of the old one. Nah, that is definitely better. Oh, where's that going? Even though the visuals for the little flames, wonder where they came from. Anyway, it does more crit, it got more of a crit multiplier. I mean, it's 10% more crit, 0.5 more multiplier, an extra 5% status, and an insane amount more damage. It went from 35 to 120, but it is purely elemental, removing the elemental block part of this because it was meant for a different weapon. Nah, still don't know how I feel about that. One of the big problems is the fact that it comes with 2Ds on it. Not one, two. If you are looking to farm it, the blade is on the Axi C2 relic. The blueprint is on the Meso V5 relic. The guard is on the Neo S6 relic. And of course, the hilt is on Neo V5. But of course, the reason this thing did end up with so much extra damage is because it is a mastery rank 12 weapon to actually build, which kind of puts it up there with those weapons that do have insane buffs over their normal counterparts. So it was expected to have high mastery rank. It wasn't really as high as expected though. I could have sworn I read somewhere it was going to be a 14, it's not, it's a 12. But being a shield and blade style weapon, despite the fact that the blade ended up looking like a hammer thing, it's actually pretty good for blocking. It was weird to take off the elemental part and lock that to the Achenbrunt, but they did say they were going to do this in advance. And what they added to this was the blocking increases your crit and status by 15% and it stacks up to 4 times. So it'll go 60% extra crit or status. Well, everything I found says crit and status. Crit chance and status chance. Not crit damage, crit chance. Of course, you do have to be blocking for that to even build up. And while blocking, it supposedly can block up to 90% of the incoming damage, and it converts that into this crit and status, which actually makes it fairly useful. I didn't realise that these did that. I know that obviously it's a shield, so it blocked a little bit more incoming, but this was the first weapon where I ran around basically blocking constantly, and that crit and status chance, despite the fact this thing only has a 15% crit chance, and I didn't really ever build it for crit while I was using it. I have since. I mean, I've got a crit build on it. We'll get into builds in a second, but it was kind of weird to experience this, and this was a huge improvement over the original Silva Aegis, but it's expected because this, of course, is a mastery rank 12, and it's a prime, so the prime version was obviously going to be buffed. This was buffed just enough that, to be fair, I still think my Helio Core is doing more damage than this, but this thing was more useful with the blocking increases the crit and status by 15%, and that can stack 4 times, it blocking up to 90% of incoming, and having Final Harbinger on here, the fact you could throw the shield at people was amazing, but talking of builds, I kind of messed up on this. I did actually drop a V polarity in this for Primed Fury, and that's why all of the animations are insanely quick, because to be fair, the combos are fairly easy to do with this in here, but it made the weapon a little bit too quick. Kind of like the Endura from last week, it's made it a little bit too quick, but I just didn't bother taking it out. I left it there because it made it quicker, which obviously means more damage quicker, and it hasn't affected the ability to perform combos, kind of like the Endura did, and basically went the rest of it with the condition overload style build. Then when it comes to the crit build, I just kind of threw a bunch of crit mods on here, and to be fair, it wasn't that bad with the whole stacking, but it only went up to 24. One other thing I do really like about this thing, even though I'm not using it currently, primed reach is kind of really effective on this thing at increasing how far you can kind of throw that shield. It visually doesn't really look that much, but you can see it when the enemy actually goes down. It's just over where you normally do it, but it's a pain to fit with the determining builds and everything else. I still prefer the status side of this to the crit. The crit's kind of low, just because it starts at 15. The status, on the other hand, is kind of high. I also like the AoE knockback when you do a ground slam. It knocks the enemies over, and if you perform a ground finisher, it is a guaranteed proc. So you can, or guaranteed to do status. But for a weapon that seems to be slightly better than the Silva Aegis Prime that came with it, I was expecting that to be the big thing from this Prime access. Looks like the Silva Aegis is actually kind of more useful, especially with that. To be fair, I said it's a 90% blocking capability earlier. It's actually 85 to 90%. It's unknown on the exact figures yet, which is something that people kind of wish was added to the stat page for these things. You know, the stat list that appears on the left when you're actually modding it. It appeared on there and told you how much damage, incoming damage, it actually blocks. Just for these weapons though, kind of like secondary firing weapons have secondary stats to it. But this thing is actually, considering the mastery rank it requires, not that bad of a little weapon. I'm not using my Helio Core, and I've been using that thing pretty much constantly. It does more damage than this thing does, but this thing, I'm enjoying running around with a shield. Anyway, we'll leave this off here for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch yous next time.